Hello and welcome back. We will start with lecture 4 today. In this is module 6. So, till now this is the module where we are discussing the acquisition of syntax by infants, by small children. So, the initial stages of syntax acquisition. Till now we have looked at the various theoretical positions as to how each of the theories, what do they predict and what are possibly the outcome of those theories and how some of the data fit in the theories, like for example, the nativist theory and the constructivist theory. We discussed in the beginning that behaviorism does not quite hold here. So, we discussed at length the nativism and the constructivism mostly, and then we also looked at some of the constraints on their productivity, on some of the rules, some of the hypotheses as to how the system probably works. So, now let us move on to some of the structures. One thing we need to keep in mind in this part is that we will be talking about only the basic structures, because we are looking at child language acquisition. We will not take into account many of the complex constructions due to paucity of time primarily. So, the idea here is to give you a basic idea as to what are the how do they go from one word to two word to slightly more complex structures. That is what we will focus on. So, so far so good. So, what is there now, what is ahead, what lies ahead. In terms of syntax, we will try to see what all are they expected to learn, what is it, what do we exactly mean that children are learning syntax of a language, or children are whatever their output is, whether it is comprehension or production, depending on what we are looking at, what is it that the children already know or what they are learning and what is the trajectory. So, some foundational aspects of syntax in this regard we will be discussing. This can be called the primitives of syntactic knowledge, as in what are the fundamental ideas, what are the basic primitives on the basis of which the later syntactic structure, later complex constructions will be based on. So, these are some of the primitives as we just mentioned. These are the formation, these are the basic building blocks of syntactic structure of a language that the child needs to learn in the very beginning, that either learn or they need to express it or show it that they know already, is part of their universal grammar or whatever. So, these are those components. So, constituent structure, then the concept of order, and then the concept of operations. So, movement, as far as universal grammar is concerned, operations are very important, where we talk about movements. So, movements leading to displacement of elements, then coordination, adjunction and embedding leading to recursion. So, these are some of the primary structures. And then we also have some computations in terms of anaphora. So, within anaphora we talk about pronoun, empty categories or ellipses, and then morphosyntax, inflections and agreement between units, sometimes distant from each other in a sentence. So, these are the primary building blocks. Mostly these fall into the these are discussed more in the UG paradigm, but these are the basic building blocks within when we talk about syntactic units. So, let us start with the syntactic units. We looked at constituent. So, let us see what that is. So, children need to understand the units of syntactic structure like clauses or phrases. So, from one word, so from word level we are now going to sentence level. So, we are not talking about at word level. So, the next immediate next landing will be at the phrase level or clauses level. So, these units combine to make a sentence. So, there are the book is a phrase, red rose is a phrase, like that. So, when once we put them together in some sort of a rule governed way, that is when we get sentences. So, this is why clauses or phrases will be our units. So, these units are called constituent structure. So, a constituent, so what is a constituent then? A constituent is a sequence of one or more items that function as a single unit in a sentence. As I just said, the red rose or the red book or a blue pen. These are, let us say, these are some small, very small phrases. So, this has the red book. Red book has an adjective and a noun. So, similarly you can have the book. So, it is a determiner and a noun like that. So, these are the constituents. This is the one of the smallest sequence of one or more items. These can be considered as units in a sentence, single unit in a sentence. So, the constituents are organized in a hierarchical manner. So, this is what we mean by hierarchical manner. Children need to understand this is called the skeleton structure of the sentence. So, in a sentence there will be the clauses are organized in a particular way, in a hierarchical fashion as it is called. So, in case of a hierarchical structure, this is how it goes. So, you have saw the sentences or the part of the sentence or the clause is saw the man with glasses. So, saw the man and then you go like this. So, you have at the top you have this VP stands for verb phrase. So, at the top you have the verb phrase and then you go on creating a tree structure. This is how it is hierarchically organized in terms of the sentence, how it ultimately builds up. So, saw comes here and then you have the man with glasses. So, this is because the man is the noun phrase here, the man with glasses. So, again you build it. So, this NP gets divided into D and then D comes here, that D is determiner and then subsequently this goes on, this is how you break it down. And in fact, if you have understood this basic skeletal structure of a sentence or let us say when children figure this out, that is when they are also able to disambiguate sentences, ambiguous sentences. So, one of the important takeaways from understanding this syntactic structure is also disambiguating sentences. Sometimes sentences could be ambiguous. This very simple sentence like saw the man with glasses, this can also be an ambiguous sentence. So, in the first case if you go by this kind of a tree structure, then somebody saw. So, let us say the Ram saw the man with glasses. So, Ram is part of a even superordinate structure and then saw the man with glasses. So, this is one structure. On the other hand, the glasses were on the man who Ram saw. In the second structure, however, you have this saw comes here and this with glasses is part of this structure. It is not part of it is not inside this, but rather it is part of the main clause where you have the main verb saw. So, here the glasses are was worn by the man who saw, by whoever saw, right. So, this is what the hierarchical structure is all about. So, the syntactic units, the constituents, the units of the sentences are organized in such a way that it helps you understand how each of those components are connected to the other components. So, what are the arguments of the verb and so on. So, this is one of the skeletal structure of a sentence. So, this is and what is the role of understanding the skeletal structure? This sometimes helps, parse the sentence, parse as in break it down to its smaller parts. So, who had the glass, who saw whom and all that, and also it helps you disambiguate certain kinds of cases. So, this brings in another important part in parsing, which is the categories. So, in the sentence there are different categories of words. So, the main categories are functional categories and the content categories. So, we have our functional category and we have our content category. Functional categories are important because they serve a grammatical role with little or no semantic content. Sometimes it can be can have semantic content, sometimes it may not, but it has a grammatical role and it is a closed class, meaning a small finite number of items are there. For example, complementizer, conjunction, inflectional markers and so on and so forth. So, these are functional categories. These are the again the basic types of categories, types of words that you have, words or works or markers or grammatical markers that are part of a sentence. And then comes our content category, which is the main, the open class words. So, they generally convey meaning. So, the main words like noun, verbs, adjectives, they form our content category. So, infinitely expandable set of items, because there is the why do we call it infinitely expandable? Because nouns, let us say a particular language has a number of nouns as x. So, there is no limit to how many nouns that language may have. So, right now it might be having x, but let us say after 10 years it might have x plus 150 nouns. So, that is possible. So, that is why it is called an open class, because it is open to expansion. However, the closed classes do not typically expand. So, that is why that is the difference. So, we have nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, these are our content categories. So, these are the two primary categories that play an important role in the parsing. So, when you parse, this is what you get. So, these are the content categories, these are the functional categories, and this is how the interaction between them happens. So, some of the most common phrases in terms of phrase structure grammar, we have noun, NP, VP, PP. So, this is how. So, the P stands for phrase, and the first one stands for the whichever type of phrase it is. So, noun phrase, verb phrase, preposition phrase, and so on and so forth. So, these are some of the examples. So, this is one adjectival phrase. So, gluey with the goo, with their paddles, fight the battle. So, fight. So, the verb is the, like we just saw the man with binoculars. So, verb will come on this side and then the battle. So, V and NP. So, the superordinate category is VP. So, the verb phrase. So, these are some of the basic, the most common phrases that we use in case of a phrase structure grammar. Now, functional categories mark and head each of the basic constituents of a sentence, because just now we saw, right. So, noun phrase. So, in case of a noun phrase, we are talking about, so noun phrase, verb phrase, for example, this is the function head, function category head. So, we have the, which is a determiner, and then we have this is the example from the same poem that we talked about in the beginning, Jabberwocky. So, this is how you break it down. So, functional categories mark and head each of the basic constituents of a sentence. These function as some sort of a joint, these are called functional heads. So, the functional heads provide a structure that holds content words like this. So, the Jabberwock, even for a moment just forget that this is not a real word, but we will treat it as some sort of a content word. So, this is how it really works. This example has been given by Barbara Lust. So, then comes the idea of order. Order as in, when words are added to the skeleton, children can mentally label phrases, and then you have a so, right, in this case we saw the order. This is about the word order in the English language. So, which way the head goes and how the branching happens depends on the word order of the language. So, that is also an important thing. So, based on which language the child is born into, their understanding of that ordering of those important functional and content categories will differ. So, nouns will head noun phrases, verbs will head verb phrases, these are the lexical heads. So, depending on languages, there are two types of heads like left and right. As I just said, English in English it will be different compared to, let us say, Hindi or any other language. So, this example is again from Barbara Lust. So, this is a case of English, and this is an example from Sinhala. If I remember correctly, this is a Sinhala example, and this is of course English. So, about mother. So, about this is on the left side. So, this is what we mean by there are two kinds of ordering in languages. It can be either on the left side or on the, so the head can come on the left or on the right. So, head here this is the head on the left. On the other side, this is where the head is on the right side. So, this is Sinhala and this is English example. So, these are the two kinds of ordering in the words, and depending on that the tree structure will differ and the head will appear either on the left or on the right. So, thus children need to understand the basic skeleton of the syntactic structure of their language, which includes the functional categories, the content categories and their ordering in the hierarchy. So, this is the hierarchy starting at the top node and how it breaks down into smaller parts. Children need to generate, as a result of which they need to generate the underlying skeleton of each sentence and the system that operates on this skeleton. So, this seems to be already a given. Universal grammar generative perspective says that this is something that you do not teach the child automatically figures this out. And how do we know? We will see shortly that even the complex sentences, complex type of syntactic parsing they can do very early in life. So, if they were dependent on learning as far as behaviorism goes, this would not be possible. Anyway, let us focus on what we are on this now. Children's first sentences generally respect the word order of the language. So, it can be SVO, SOV. So, S subject verb object or subject object verb or VSO. There can be many different kinds of word order. So, in case of Indian languages, say let us say maine roti khai, so subject, object and verb, but in English it will be I ate pizza. So, your subject, verb, object. So, this is what we mean by basic word order. So, this is something that children do not seem to make a mistake when they start speaking in their language. It is not like for the sake of argument, let us say that children in the beginning, in the initial stages, they have just some sort of a generic word order that they produce, and over a period of time they master their own language or word order that is accepted in their own language, and then they learn, but that is not how it really happens. Children generally start, when they start speaking in sentences, they generally get it right. Very interesting data comes from German, that in German the verb final subordinate, the subordinate clause has a verb final structure, whereas the main clause has verb second construction. So, in a main clause the verb will come second, but in the subordinate clause verb will be final. So, there is a difference between the main clause and the relative clause, the subordinate clause, that in terms of the position of the verb. Now, this might be confusing for somebody who is learning German, let us say at an adult age, but not for the child, because the data from children suggests that they do not get confused, even though some structures, some researchers had pointed out that children may show extended period of verb final structure because they tend to stick to one. But later studies showed that German children early on can exhibit the exact structure that their language expects them to do. So, in case of subordinate clause, they use verb final construction, but in case of main clause they do not. So, that confusion actually does not really arise in case of the German children. Now, syntactic units need to be mapped onto this structure. Words are then mapped onto these units. So, the syntactic units and the categories and then the syntactic units. So, what are the syntactic units? The verb, the noun, and then you map on the phrase structure. So, what phrase? Noun phrase, within the noun phrase where it will go, what is the position. So, this structure and order may be transformed when forming WH sentences, for example, WH questions. So, not only children figure out the words and their syntactic category and their position in the hierarchical structure within a sentence, they also seem to figure out that this structure undergoes certain changes, some transformation, some inversion of certain structures while they are doing, let us say creating a WH question, or they are creating a passive formation, for example. So, that is what they will do after this. So, after the 2 word stage, this is when they actually start acquiring syntactic structure. Hence, it is important to distinguish between the age of emergence of a particular structure and the age of acquisition. Some researchers do make a distinction. So, when they have started to understand and started to create versus when they have already they are competent in using those structures. So, that some sort of a difference is always made. So, some and based on these children actually differ. Some children might start to show the emergence of certain structure, let us say passives pretty early, but they, for them to be able to masterfully use it, they might take a lot of longer duration. On the other hand, some children might not show the emergence of passives till let us say 2.5 years, 3 years, 4 years, but when they do not take much time to master it. So, this is where some interpersonal change differences might be visible, and hence it has been taken into account while studying syntactic acquisition among children. The order of acquisition of various structure is also very important. So, what comes first? What do children learn first? Which of the structure they learn first, and how is there an order? If so, is there universally some sort of an universal rule? So, it seems there is very little variation between children in case of most structures. So, once children start stringing more than 2 words together, they develop their grammar on many fronts simultaneously. So, what it means is that on the one hand there is a difference between emergence and final acquisition, on the other hand there is a sequence. However, while we are talking about sequence, it does not mean that you many things you kind of stop at one particular aspect, and then once that is mastered you start learning another. That is not how it goes. How it goes is children start to develop many of the grammatical categories at the same time, but they might master one before the other. That is what what this basically means. So, while the auxiliaries might still not be in place fully, they might start using embedded clauses. So, many things are happening at the same time. Remember, we talked about word formation. There is an outburst of word vocabulary acquisition at certain points. Similarly, there is a tendency to learn multiple things. So, they are still figuring out their auxiliaries, but they might start to use their embedded clauses. So, things go simultaneously, but they may not master them simultaneously. That is the idea. So, this is the well known sequence of morphemes that children are supposed to learn. This is from Child's database. The original data came from Roger Brown's seminal work. So, this is how it apparently goes, his data from the Adam and Eve, and there was a third child. So, they are progressive verb ending followed by prepositions, then plural noun ending, irregular past tense verb, possessive articles, regular past tense verbs, so on and so forth. So, this seems to be the order. However, this data was from English, so that you need to keep in mind, but this is how it has been studied in way back. Roger Brown's study comes from late 1970s. Some common clauses of the children that they learn in English language at this stage. So, these are some of the clauses that are very common and have been attested by many researchers. So, you have S plus V. So, daddy is laughing. So, subject and verb, then subject verb plus do, that he broke do stands for this is the abbreviation for direct object, IO is for indirect object. So, IO and DO. So, SVO, SV and then O, then like this SVO and PP, I put it on the floor like this. So, some of these structures are pretty common among English learning children, and typically they appear in most cases. Then in terms of noun phrases, about 2 years children are able to produce noun phrases with pre-modification of the noun. What it means is that they will have a adjective before the noun. So, the modifier comes before the noun. So, this they master around 2 years already. So, big house, more biscuit, this, that, my book. Around 2.5 years multiple pre-modification appear like that red ball. So, starting with simple structure and then gradually moving to slightly more complex. A little later, around 3 years, post modification appears with prepositional phrases. So, the picture of Lego town. So, which picture? Picture of Lego town. So, this happens at little later. So, starting with pre-modification, with one modifier and then 2 and so on. Then pronouns appear around 2 years. The first pronouns are I, me, you, it. often they appear in the objective form first. So, like me, even when the subject in subject position, me want toy, this is very common among English speaking children, and then other pronouns appear a little later. Then we have verb and its forms. If you recall, we talked about that the learning verbs are slightly more difficult compared to learning nouns. So, so the verb and its different forms start appearing in stages. So, auxiliaries appear a little later than the main verbs. So, around 2 years the modal auxiliaries can and will emerge. These auxiliaries appear first in questions and negative sentences. At around 2.3 years, the use of past tense inflection first appears. However, rule formation is evident. Even if they are able to speak those utter those constructions, they may not, the idea of that they have already figured out the rule formation, that is evident a little later, around 2.6 years. By children's overgeneralization of ed, for example, I breaked it, I fell down, that is when you realize that the rule formation is already in place. So, they are using the same rule for many things. Overgeneralization is one of the important features of speech at the around this age. So, this is what you see in this kind of structure. So, that is when you know the rule formation is already there. And then of course, tense marking, children tend to use tense marking inconsistently in the beginning for some more years. Initially it takes them some time, though they might get it, but consistency for consistency to appear, it takes a little bit of more time. English speaking children express the progressive aspect only via the ing inflection in the beginning. So, me going, not like I am going, but initially it might appear in this kind of a format. Eventually, when auxiliary starts to get added, then they get the whole form. Other aspect markers like perfective, these things are they appear a little later. The reason, one of the reasons that have been proposed by many scholars is that why does present continuous tense make a beginning so early, is because children's initial speech is about here and now, whatever is happening right in front of them, whatever they are doing, whatever their caregiver are doing, this is what their conversation typically revolves around. So, that is why probably the ing inflection they learn pretty fast as opposed to any other kind of tense marking. This is one of the hypotheses. So, these are the basic structures. So, starting with functional category, content category, noun, verb, pronouns and all of this. So, all of these are typically in place by 2.5 years. Some children, of course, it might go to 3 years. So, this is where we complete this particular segment. In the next segment, we will talk about more complex structures and how they appear. Thank you.